telephone line today, we have an honorary guest, author of 2 sports books, and former mayor of the birthplace of baseball, Cooperstown, New York, Mr. Jeff Katz. Jeff, thank you so much for being with me today on KMET Radio.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Jeff, I read that you are a longtime fan of the national pastime. How did that affection for the game begin for you?
I think it was just always there. I was born in Brooklyn in 1962, so on the heels of the Dodgers leaving. So all of my family members, whether it was my father or uncles, they were either ex-Dodger fans who had converted to Mets fans or they stayed Dodger fans. So I was always kind of brought up in a baseball-centric family.
Now, born in Brooklyn, New York, I'm from Brooklyn. I'm from the Canarsie section. What part did you grow up in?
Me too, Canarsie, East 82nd
Really?
Street. I was there till 4th grade. We moved to Long Island.
Yeah, there's nothing like Brooklyn. The best pizza, the best hot dogs, the best bagels, huh?
Yeah, I have a lot of fond memories. I mean, I was there 62 to 71, so it's a long time ago now. But every once in a while, if I'm down in the city, I'll take a little detour just to drive through those streets, and they're all so familiar to me.
Nothing like Brooklyn. Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing, and did you ever envision that one day you would be mayor of Cooperstown, New York?
Well, not really. I mean, who envisions that, right?
Right.
But always I was reading baseball books. I remember I went to PS 114. I don't know if that's where you went to school. But we used to have those Scholastic book sales, and I remember getting a book about the Hall of Fame when I was probably, and that's when I first thought about Cooperstown. But as someone who was not just always interested in baseball, but like everyone who knew me growing up knew I was like into baseball. So when we moved to Cooperstown, everyone through Facebook was like, yeah, of course you're going to end up in Cooperstown. And then to be mayor, kind of just an incredible experience. And it was something I just wanted to share with everyone in my orbit. So, people would come up and visit. Like now they knew the mayor. They had been friends with the mayor. So I felt like I wanted everyone to vicariously live that through me. And it was a great 6 years. I was 6 years as mayor. We got a ton of things done. It was really incredible to be able to introduce myself as mayor of Cooperstown. I never thought that would be the case.
Yeah, so how did your political career begin, and when did you come to the decision that you wanted to run for mayor?
Well, Cooperstown, Cooperstown to the public and Cooperstown to the people who live here are very different things. So people are always amazed that there are only 1,800 people who live in Cooperstown year-round. I mean, there are people who live in apartment buildings in cities that have more people in their buildings than live in Cooperstown. So when you're here as a resident, you realize it's just a small village. That's at the core what it is year-round. There's a 6-person board of trustees, as well as a mayor, and a guy I knew asked me if I wanted to run for the village board. I said, sure, why not? I always had interest in those types of things. And I really researched a lot. I wanted to know as much as I could, and I won. Not only did I win, I beat the guy who plays Santa Claus.
Oh, really?
So Jewish kid from Brooklyn and by way of Chicago comes to Cooperstown and gets the most votes, even more than Santa. But once I was in government, it was really run as a small village and kind of denied the power of the Cooperstown name and what it could do for the village budget and for the people who lived here. And it was somewhat controversial to kind of say we should have paid parking, we should go for grants, we should do all these things. So it was kind of an intense period. The first time I ran for mayor, I lost, and the second time I won, and then it kind of changed the village. The village has gotten so many big projects done. So once I won as a trustee, then I wanted to be mayor. I wanted to get things done, and I did.
And you did. And you must have been asked this question so many times. Why did you not decide to seek reelection?
Well, so I had been mayor for 6 years, but before that I had been a village trustee for 7 years. So I was 13 years in village government. The mayor term was 2 years, every 2 years. And as I got into my last term, or what would turn out to be my last term, I kind of knocked everything off the list of things I wanted to do, culminating in getting $5 million for a soon-to-begin rehab of Doubleday Field. And then it became like, do you just want to stay to stay? I mean, it's like I say, it's awesome to say I'm mayor of Cooperstown. But there is, I did make it a lot of work. It's technically a part-time job, but I really put a lot into it. And just to go around and say I'm mayor of Cooperstown without kind of wanting to do more things didn't seem worthwhile to me. So I miss it sometimes. Most of the times I don't, though.
I was gonna say, do you miss it? Now, I also understand you're a collector of sports cards and memorabilia. Is that true?
Yeah, I've always been a card guy. I mean, I think the first stack of cards I opened were Beatles cards because that was like a big thing, obviously, in 1964, and I was really little. I was only 2 years old. But I've always been into cards, and that has stayed with me to this day. And, one of the nice things about living in Cooperstown is there's a couple of really good local card shops. So, I have things that a lot of people don't have anymore.
Well, I got to ask you, Jeff, talk about some of the prized possessions in your sports card collection.
Well, there's a difference between kind of dollar value and value. That's of my youth, like 1971 and 70 baseball, even 1971 and 70 football, which I just kind of knocked off. They're not super high dollar value things, but to have them all really means a lot to me. So I don't think of it that way. I mean, certainly having like a Seaver rookie card, Seaver was my guy, means a lot to me. But I don't really sit there and say, like, here are my top three most, expensive cards. To me, at the core, why I like collecting and why I keep collecting is it really does bring me back to certain periods of my life and all the memories that surround that. Getting back to Canarsie, riding my bike to the local stores on, Flatlands Avenue to buy packs of cards is something I think about still, and it's 40 years ago now.
Now, you mentioned the 1971 Topps baseball cards. Those cards, as you know, they're so difficult to get centered because of their black border. Are you a card condition conscious collector?
It kind of depends. So I kept my cards starting relatively early, like 72. The cards I had before then, I just didn't keep. I wasn't serious about it. So everything from like 72 on is kind of from packs, and I kept them in good shape. So what I've kind of developed is a consistency of condition. So I knew before I finished my 71 set, they weren't as sharp as, say, my 1974 cards. So I just wanted them to look all the same. But I'm not, everyone has different things that bug them. Like centering doesn't bug me. If it's miscut, it bugs me. But if it's off center, I don't care. It comes out, if you remember collecting packs when the quality control was lousy, you would get off center cards from a pack that would still look nice. So lucky for me is because I'm not that keen on centering, there are values to be had out there. I don't like creases. That's definitely, I avoid creases. I like my corners as sharp as possible, but as you say, 71s are difficult. So, I wasn't going to spend the next 20 years of my life trying to find, perfectly sharp, unworn 71 cards. So I ended up with a set I'm pretty happy with.
And since we're talking about the condition of a baseball card, what's your opinion on the grading services, the grading companies? Do you have one?
I really dislike the whole grading world. And in fact, I'm not sure exactly when it started, but in the late 90s, I was at a kind of peak also of interest, and I was working on a lot of sets. And the grading started, and certainly star cards were the first things that got graded. But then as you saw nicer commons got graded, I'm like, this is ridiculous. All I want is a nice common. I shouldn't have to, pay a premium for grading. So it kind of turned me off the hobby for a while. But I realized, 4+ years ago when I kind of really got into it again, there's plenty of ungraded commons in the area I'm looking at. So I don't buy commons, or I don't buy graded cards unless it's a deal, and then I'll crack it out of the case. I don't really want it in the case. The flip side is I actually have some pre-war cards I've been starting to get rid of, and I'm like, I had to get a couple of graded, and I really was not happy with the process. I sent one to STC, and I sent one to PSA, and certainly everyone thinks their stuff is nicer than it is, so I wasn't that thrilled with the grades, and I wasn't that thrilled with the whole way it worked and how much it cost me to get just single cards graded. So I've kind of started listing stuff to sell of pre-war cards, and I'm kind of getting pretty good prices. It might take longer, but I'm not a big fan of grading.
Do you ever get a chance to, go to the National Sports Collectors Convention or any major conventions in the area?
So I lived in Chicago from 87 to 03, and there were a few nationals that were in Chicago during that period, and I did go to those, and they were great. I started going to shows in Manhattan in 1973.
Were those the Paul Gallagher shows? Those Paul Gallagher shows? Remember those?
Oh, God, they were the best. I mean, and the guys back then in the 70s, even though it was still a cash game, it wasn't like what it became. And the guys who were dealers tended to be hobbyists. And for a kid, I was in 73, I was 11. So from 11 to maybe 17, I didn't feel these guys were kind of preying on me as a kid with a little bit of money, trying to steer me into crappy stuff. They really had good advice, and they helped me. So those are the shows I liked the best. The Nationals in Chicago were great. Now that I'm in New York, there's an East Coast National, which is kind of a contradiction in terms, but it's in White Plains, so it's a few hours away. I just went last weekend and got some good things. It's hard to beat. There are deals to be had. There's such a variety of product there. But getting back to graded, the guys who have just tables of graded stuff, they're easy for me to walk by.
Right.
It kind of cuts down how many tables I have to look at.
So, Jeff, you must have met a lot of the early pioneers since you were buying baseball cards in the early 70s.
I probably did. I didn't know them at the time. There's a guy in Cooperstown, his name is Pete Henrici. He has a store named Baseball Nostalgia, and it really started as the flagship of TCMA. So Mike Aronstein, who started TCMA, comes up to Cooperstown. He's a longtime friend. I'm sure I must have met those guys back then. It's only now that I know them later in life that we connect on that level, tobacco cards, and pop them in the mail and get them signed. The value of 50-cent tobacco cards, and he would send it out, come back with Harry Hooper's autograph or something like that. So I'm sure I met those guys, but it didn't mean anything to me then. They weren't kind of the pioneers then. They were just there.
Right,
but
right.
But like I say, that scene was a great scene. Just good stuff, and, I would usually come, the show would be after my birthday or after Hanukkah or something, and I always had like $100, which was a lot in 1975. And I could get nice things. It was really a great time.
Jeff, do you remember the very first baseball card you purchased at a card show?
I don't remember the first, but I remember some. And so I really didn't have a focus at the first show I went to. I just kind of walked around. I didn't quite know what I was going to. I wasn't working on old sets. I was just starting to buy older cards through catalogs. But I remember, this represents, how scattered I was. The first show, I bought 2 T206 cards. One of Hal Chase. No, not bad Chase, probably VG. And then I bought a Christy Mathewson, which has no back. The whole back is torn off. But I had, a Christy Mathewson card, and who knows what it cost. It might have been, $1. I got a 1965 Don Maynard Topps card. Why? I don't know. I was always a Namath fan. In fact, our youngest son is named Joseph William, Joe Willie. and somehow I never bought a Namath rookie card. I have no idea why. But also that's really nice magazine photos signed by not just DiMaggio, which is now relatively easy over time, but I have a Jackie Robinson signed picture. And
well, that's a nice piece.
Yeah, right? I think combined were $15.
Oh, man.
So,
we're talking to former mayor of Cooperstown, Jeff Katz. Jeff, let me ask you a couple of Hall of Fame questions. What's your view on making a separate wing one day in Cooperstown for the steroid players? Do you think that'll ever happen?
No. There'll never be a separate wing. The idea that people have that if Bonds and Clemens don't get in through the writers' vote, that at some point the Hall will reckon with that era and create something for them, shows a lack of understanding of the Hall. The Hall doesn't want those guys in. They constricted the length of time they could be on the ballot from 15 to 10 years. Joe Morgan, as vice chair of the Hall of Fame, sent a letter out to people saying don't vote for these guys. So I really don't. The idea that baseball hates cheaters is is contradicted by 150 years of baseball history. Baseball has loved its cheaters. Why these guys are perceived as worse cheating? I mean, you can get into these arguments with people where they say, yeah, but it's not as bad as that cheating. It's like, if you're against cheating, there shouldn't be grades of cheating that work. The hypocrisy around the steroid issues, why Andy Pettitte is a hometown hero and great for admitting he takes steroids, but other guys are not. It's a bizarre thing. So, I mean, I think Bond should be in. I think Clemens should be in. I have no problem with that era. And I think it's obvious that people like Jose Canseco, who are perceived as fabricators and, hyperbolic analysis of the era, they're right. It was probably a pretty level playing field, maybe 80% used. So I would just rather see Bonds in as a regular vote because if he doesn't get in, he's never getting in.
Yeah, and during your tenure as mayor of Cooperstown, Piazza got in, and I remember there was some controversy there. Do you recall that year when Piazza was inducted and that controversy that was going on in New York City?
Yeah, I certainly, I'm aware of everyone who's accused and not accused. They're in. There's no sense that this controversy is part of it anymore. I've read reports, and you can figure this out on your own, guys who played in that era who are most likely steroid-related. And in 2013, when there were no living inductees, I was listening to a Fergie Jenkins interview, and he's like, yeah, we're pretty sure there are guys in already who were steroid users. And I think that's the reality. But once you're in, you're in. And, no one wants to put you out and, disparage you. They just don't want anyone else in. So once Piazza got the vote, it was fine. Once Bagwell got the vote, it was fine. No one sits there and says, well, Jeff Bagwell, he probably took stuff or he may have taken stuff. It doesn't matter. And to some degree, I think that's going to be the case if the other big guys get in. Bonds can't be disconnected from that. But the idea that Hall of Famers won't show up because they're disgusted by Bonds is just not the case.
Now, I also want to get in your two books. You're author of two books, The Kansas City A's and The Wrong Half of the Yankees. That's one book, right?
Yes.
And Split Season 1981, Fernando Mania, The Bronx Zoo, and The Strike That Saved Baseball. That's book two. How did each of those books come about?
Well, the A's and the Yankees book came about just because I was in Cooperstown. I was home, and I've read a ton of baseball books in my life. I'm like, I could write a book. And the A's and Yankees story of the 50s always intrigued me because there clearly was something nefarious going on, where the Yankees basically controlled the A's. And if you hate the Yankees, it feeds into how evil they are. And if you love the Yankees, it feeds into how smart they are. But it never really kind of was looked into in the way I wanted to look into it. You know, the intricate business relationship between the Yankees owners and the Kansas City A's owners, how the Yankees kind of use their clout to get this guy in a position of ownership. And then in 5 years that the A's owner, Arnold Johnson, owned the team, he shifted tons of players to the Yankees and even worse, kind of parked players in Kansas City for them. So, you know, the Yankees had Ralph Terry as a young starter. They didn't really have room for him on the roster. They sent him to Kansas City. He had a few good years, and then when the Yankees needed him, he went right back. This period all culminated with the Yankees getting Roger Maris from the A's, and that caused such an uproar that, you know, it looked like MLB was probably going to step in and end that, but then Arnold Johnson died, so it ended on its own. So I wrote that book, and it got some nice press, got some good reviews, and I really enjoyed the writing process. So the story I really loved was the 81 strike. I was 17 going on 18 that year. It's a strike that kind of has been lost in the shuffle because of 94, but it's really the pivotal strike to me in baseball history because it solidified free agency and really helped the game. Someone was just writing about how the 80s had no repeat World Series championships. And that is a direct result of saving free agency, where bad teams could quickly get better with a free agent signing. So I wrote that book, got to talk to a lot of guys intimately involved in the negotiating of that year. Plus, it's a great baseball year. And Split Season did well nationally, got a lot of good press. I was on Olbermann's show, on MLB Network, on NPR. I really enjoyed that year. So they're both out there and available on Amazon.
On Amazon. Now, if our listening audience goes to your website, can they purchase it on your website as well?
You know, the Jeff-Katz.com website does have links to Amazon, but actually, if you want a signed copy, just email me through the website. It's splitseason1981@gmail.com, and we can work on that.
And my final question, Jeff, any new projects you're currently working on?
Yeah, I've been working on a proposal about baseball movies. There's never been like a really entertaining book about baseball movies, so I'm hoping to get something done about that. You know, everyone loves talking about Major League and Bull Durham and Field of Dreams, and particularly the movies of the 80s are set in a place that has a lot of cultural reference to the Reagan era. Not to be heavy-handed about it, I'm not like a political science writer, but those 80s movies are really intimately connected to that period politically, and they're interesting stories on how they got made, how they became popular or not. So I'm hoping to do another book on that.
Well, I appreciate a few minutes. I'm going to mention your two books again and your website at the end of the program. I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Terrific. It was great fun. Thanks for having me on.
Take care of yourself.
Bye-bye.
That was former Mayor Jeff Katz of Cooperstown, New York.